It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my very special guest is Thalma Lobel, and we're going to be discussing her new book, Whatever Works, the small cues that make a surprising difference in our success at work and how to create a happier office. Thalma, it is truly an honor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, let's kick off our conversation with a bit of what we might call the Thalma Lobel origin story. This is the first time I'm meeting you. I know you're going to be new to some of my viewers, some of my listeners. So what are a few of the things we need to know about you?
Well, I'm a psychology professor at Tel Aviv University. I studied my undergraduate and graduate studies, my PhD at Tel Aviv University. Then I went to Harvard for my postdoc, stayed there for 4 years, and actually returned later on to be a visiting professor and taught there at Harvard. Returned to Israel, and all my professional life, besides being a visiting professor from time to time at UCSD, Tufts, and NYU, but most of my professional time is at Tel Aviv University. So this is my credential as a psychologist. But I want to say, because it's really relevant to the book, is that I was not sitting in the ivory tower. Although all my professional life I was doing, and I'm still doing research and teaching, but I was the dean of students. I was the chair of the School of Psychological Sciences. I am sitting on several board of directors. I'm interviewing, whether I'm interviewing even CEOs or students for clinical psychologists or secretaries, and I am managing a lot of people. And so I think the combination of my expertise as a psychologist or a psychology professor and my experience in real life made me write this book.
Well, it's good to know that all of your experience is not merely from research and sitting up in your ivory tower. As far as your education background, maybe any teaching that you've done, did you have a specific area of focus or specialization?
Yeah, actually I had several because, I've been teaching for years. So when I did my master's in clinical psychology and PhD in clinical and cognitive, but then when I went to Harvard, I focused more on social psychology, social development. Then did for several years studies on gender development, social development, gender differences, published many articles in really top journals, professional journals. But about more than 10 years ago, about 12 or 13 years ago, I wanted to do what I always dreamt of, to look more deeply into what are the things that we are less aware of that influence our behavior. And the second thing I wanted to do very much is to write finally a book for the general audience, not only articles in professional journals. I really think that psychology especially has so many interesting findings for the general audience that it's a shame that most of them are published in very specific journals that most people don't read. So I wrote my first book, which is Sensation, the New Science of Physical Intelligence, which actually talked about the various physical sensations that influence our judgments, our behavior, and our decisions without our awareness. The book was very successful, translated to many languages, published in 15 different countries. I was invited all over the world and really gave speeches to marketing, to the police, to banks, to all kinds of things, and really liked it. So that's why I decided to write my second book, the new one, which is this one, which I'm showing you to show the name. It's Whatever Works, the small cues that make a surprising difference in our success at work, and how to create a happier office, or actually workplace, because it's not only in the office, it's also when you work at home. Which focuses, it continues the first book, but it's different. It focuses mainly on the things that influence our success and our well-being at work, and the small things that we are not aware of. Usually, we're not aware of.
Well, and one more question, maybe about your background, your backstory, before we get into the book. When somebody spends a lot of time researching, studying, getting educated in a direction, I'm always curious to find out, like, where did that spark first start? So in terms of your interest in psychology and behavior and influence on performance, was that something that you can see inklings of when you were a child or when you were in like junior high, high school, college? Like, when did that fascination begin?
Well, that surprised me, this question, but I think I know. When I was like 16, I was reading a lot all the time. I was a kind of child, although I liked sport a lot too. But so I was not that child that only reading, but I was reading a lot. And my uncle brought me a book. I remember The Psychology of a Woman. At that time, it was a big thing. And I read it. Before that, I wanted to study medicine. And I read this book and I decided I want to study psychology. Now, in Israel, you go to the army. And while I was in the army, I applied to psychology. It was very difficult to get in Tel Aviv University. I got in. The rest is history. And then and then while you're studying, you change your main fields of interest. And that's a good thing about being in the university. It's not like you decided you are working on one thing. That's it. I develop personally. I know more things now. So I think I'm that's the happiest time in my life professionally, because I really like these studies that I'm doing now.
Well, and as somebody who has spent more than a decade myself working in the publishing industry, I'm always encouraged to hear stories where reading a book shifts the direction, shifts the focus of somebody's life really forever. So that's a fantastic story. Thank you so much for sharing that. In terms of the new book, Whatever Works, how are you hoping to maybe differentiate that from other self-help books? Because we see lots of books focused on career success and changing habits, but maybe what's the secret sauce or that different element you want to make sure readers get from your new book?
Actually, it's very easy for me to answer because it's really, I believe it's different. Most self-help books, which some of them are excellent, focus on things, more obvious things like how to interact with others, or on motivation, how to change your mindset, how to networking, all these things. Well, these are obvious things that you need still to know how to do them. My book, Whatever Works, focuses on the less obvious, the really less obvious, the subtle things that we are often not aware of them, or we are aware of them, but we don't know that they influence us. And I'll be more specific when we go on talking. And still, they make a huge difference on our performance, our creativity, and our well-being. And that's what makes it really different from the other books. And they are also easy to be implemented. Once you read about their influence, and you will see, if you let me tell you about them, and some of the things, of course, I hope people will read, you will see that they're easy to be done, and yet people didn't think about it before. That's what makes it different, I think.
Well, in terms of the book, I really like that you divided it into 3 sections. I felt like the layout was done very, very well. So let's jump right into the first part of the first part of the book, and that's Whatever Works at the Office. And the thing I wanted to start with is this idea of temperature. I think when we think of like temperature and kind of feel of the environment in an office, really comfort, discomfort, I'm too hot, I'm too cold. That's kind of what we're thinking about. But in terms of what temperature can do, how that can impact us, what's the influence that has over us? I think a lot of us don't even realize this.
Right. We all know, for example, I think I wrote this example in the book, that when we go either in the office, people sometimes have arguments. They want to turn off or on the air condition, and there are gender differences. Women are usually suffer more from cold, and in meetings often I already know to bring in the summer. I bring a small sweater in my bag because it's always too cold for me. And I can't argue because most of them are men, so I put the small jacket and I'm okay. But seriously, temperature influence more than anything. It's not only, of course, that it's more comfortable and everybody knows when he or she is comfortable, but it influences our performance. So first of all, we have to know that the range of temperature which are good is between 68 to 72 Fahrenheit. This is the range that is optimal, is considered optimal. If you go out of these ranges, it affects your performance. But it affects, I'm not talking about really extreme, that you're freezing or you are all sweating. But if you go out, it's more it's better to be a little bit too cold than being a little bit too hot. That's very important to remember. When you're a little bit too warm, you might be very comfortable, but your performance is decreased. It affects your performance. So it's better to be on the little cooler side, not, as I say, not very extreme, but on the cooler side. That's one thing that you have to remember, that it really affects your performance. Not only that you feel, okay, I was a little bit hot, but it was really nice and all that. And again, I'm not talking about sweating and really feeling uncomfortable. The second thing I want to say, that people don't think sometimes that temperature influences in other ways. For example, if you want people to bond to you, to be more, also to conform more to you, to agree with you, make the room a little bit more warmer. Studies show that if the room is a little bit warmer, people kind of bond more and agree with your ideas more. So you can use that in meetings or negotiations. Again, not letting them feel uncomfortable, but turn it a little bit towards the warmer. If you are sitting alone, and that's one of the things which are good when you work at home, and you completely can control the temperature, or if you have your private office and you're not connected to the general thermostat, try to do it in the comfort zone, but a little bit to do towards the colder side. It will affect your performance.
And next, I'd love for you to talk to us about the positive impact of green and blue spaces. How can those make a difference?
Well, this I like a lot because they really, really make a difference. And this, again, people know that nature is very nice. And I'm sure they say, we don't need to read Thalma's book to know that we love nature. But there are many studies that show that it's more than just an aesthetic, experience that you go to nature, to the forest or to the sea or to the rivers if it's blue, or to the forest or parks. There are many studies that show that if you took a stroll in nature, or it doesn't have to be a remote forest, it can be a park with trees and flowers, but still there are green things in front of you, compared to those who walked in urban scenery. Those who walked in nature performed better. For example, they made many studies like that they gave people a break. They took a break from work. One group walked in urban scenery, another group walked in nature, and then they gave them another cognitive task or several tasks, and those who walked in nature performed better. So first of all, it influences our performance. In a minute, I'll be more specific how it affects. And the other things, that reduces stress. There are many studies, some of them were conducted in Japan, that they did in many forests and with many subjects, that they put half of them always in forest and the other one in urban scenery. And they told them to sit and watch, and they told them to walk. And they took their physiological measures, like blood pressure and the conductance of the skin and heart rate and all kinds of things, even the cortisol that they took from which is the stress hormone that they took from their saliva. And in all these studies, again and again, so here can be really, really, it's not like one study found it. Those that sat or walked in the forest were lower on these physiological dimensions that express stress or anxiety compared to those who sat in urban. So it's definitely true. If you want to be relaxed, to lower your stress and to perform better, even if you work in an office or at home when you don't have any nature, make an effort, go out, take a break, even if you don't have a time. It can be a short break if you have around you in nature. If you don't, and walk, and just walk, or even sit if you're tired. Sit and watch the waves if you're near the sea or the river, or watch some trees. Now, if you don't have this, sometimes you really don't have that, the second best is to put pictures of nature, or even nature voices. You can put some earrings, or you can put headsets, and you can listen via the internet, all kind of birds and water coming. It's also relaxing and influences your performance when you take a break. Don't do it together. Or, as I said, look at photos. And that brings me, if you don't want me to talk about it, please stop me, about the window in the office. It's first of all, it's very important to have a window in the office. If you're working from home, definitely you can choose. If you work in the office, I hope you have a window. Why? First of all, it's important for the light. Sunlight is much better than artificial light. It also makes us also perform better. But I'm talking now about the view. If you have a window with a view, take a break and just look at it. Just get up and look, even for a few minutes. If you don't have, you can, and you have, I don't know, in the other side of the office or in the other side of your home, go there and look for a few minutes. The best thing is, as I said, is to go out, but not always you can, not always you have the scenery, but try to bring nature. And also bring plants in the room if you don't have any other choice to go out. As I said, just to summarize it, they will both perform your performance and reduce the stress. Guaranteed.
Well, it makes me want to start looking out my window right now, but I'll have to wait till after we're done with the interview.
I can wait 5 minutes.
No, we'll keep moving. Let's transition now into the middle part of the book, and that's called Whatever Works for Your Team. And I'd love to have you give us some insight on how the clothes we wear can affect us and our team. Now, I've worked in kind of two different industries. I spent over a decade working in some software companies when I was up in Minnesota, working in very formal environments where, it was business casual to highly professional sometimes, or, flip-flops, jeans, and T-shirts. And I've also worked now in the Christian publishing space, and that tends to be a bit more formal in terms of dress and professionalism. And so this one was kind of fascinating for me. So in terms of what we wear, how does that affect us and our team and how we perceive each other?
Yeah, that's a good subject because it's very complicated. First of all, it changed a lot. I give in the book the survey how it was when 30 years ago when they told us to come with a tie and everything. But even now in Japan, not quite recently, women were not allowed to have glasses. And then they, of course, rejected that. And that's how I know it, because they made all kind of fuss about it, rightly so. Or some offices tell the women to come with high heels. Some offices, you have to wear a tie, etc., etc. I remember I wrote it in the book also that when I was at Harvard many years ago, the young professors that I knew, they all wore jeans and all that. But before they went to teach, they put a tie. So I asked them once, did anybody tell you to put a tie? I said, no, but I think that's what they are expecting me. I don't think it's any more expected, but still, a professor will not come to work with shorts and flip-flops. Or somebody at the bank who works in a bank has some expectations. Even if they don't tell him to wear a tie, he cannot come with shorts or he cannot come with T-shirt or whatever. So there are rules, even though we think they don't. When I had my first book, Sensation, I came to give a talk in Google, New York. And I invited some of my friends there that work in very professional offices, and they were shocked to see all these workers in Google. I remember specifically one said, wow, they come with T-shirts and sneakers. So that shows that it depends where you work, of course. But having said that, and I think people know that, clothes still influence the way we are perceived. There are many studies that show, for example, that in interviews or in mock interviews, when people thought that they were interviewing and had to say what they think about that person, they showed people the same woman, only to one group, she had one button more unbuttoned, or the skirt was short, but not too short, just above the knee as compared to below the knee, and one button more open. And then they were asked about this woman. If the woman was interviewed to be a CEO, she was judged less favorably if she were a little bit more provocative than if she were more professional, without the button open. If she was defined as secretary, there was no difference. So people expect, and they really judge her that to be less intelligent, although they saw exactly the same movie, because they show it on a movie. She spoke exactly the same thing. She said exactly the same thing. So people do judge according to your clothes. Unfortunately, but it's true. But what is more interesting, and I think people don't know that we behave differently sometimes based on the clothes we wear. And for example, there was one study that people were given a white coat. One group was given a white coat, the other one was not given a white coat, like a doctor coat. And they were asked to perform some cognitive task. Those who wore a white coat performed better because they perceived themselves as intelligent as doctors. The second experiment was even more interesting. They gave again one group white coat and the other one not, but half of those who got a white coat were told it's a painter white coat. And the other half were told that it's a doctor's white coat. Those who were told that it's a doctor's white coat performed better. Another study examined that in negotiations. They told one group, it's kind of an experiment in negotiation. One group was told to wear professionally, with the dress, pants, and jacket. It was only men. And the other group were told to wear sweatpants and flip-flop. And then they were told to negotiate about something in an experiment. Those who were professional did better, performed better, and made less concessions in the negotiation than those who wore flip-flop and training. Which means that even though we don't want to think so, it affects the way we perform and we perceive ourselves. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. So even if I jump to Zoom, for example, if I interact with somebody in Zoom, and for example, that person doesn't see if I wear pants. By the way, if you want, I can stand up and show you that I'm wearing pants. But my advice is, if it's important, it's an interview or something, wear as if you are face-to-face. Because even if you're sure that nobody will see the bottom part, but you have to feel professional because it will affect your performance.
That's fascinating. That the old saying of dress for success, clearly that is a real thing. And I like the part about the white coat, depending on how it was positioned. If it was a painter's coat versus like a lab coat, people stepped into the character of the coat they thought they were wearing. That's really interesting.
Yeah, because most people understand and that, if you wear differently, people will judge you differently. But I think that most people don't know that it will be influence your performance, cognitive performance. I wouldn't think so if I didn't read these papers that I can perform better depending on what I'm wearing, but it does.
Well, whatever coat you're going to wear to work, folks, choose wisely. It does make a difference. Let's transition now into the last part of the book that's called Whatever Works for You. And that section kind of focuses on personal habits. Talk to us next about how our always on technology affects us. My phone is sitting right here on my desk in front of me right now. Is that distracting me even if I'm not using it?
Yes, it does. And you're leading me to the study that you probably read in my book, which was quite fascinating because I really was surprised. Because people know that they are distracted if I'm holding my phone and each time I check my messages. For example, this is true. Today I gave a lecture in the morning, so all the time I want to say, wow, I get the compliments. The lecture was very good. So I turned it down. I put it here only because if you email me or something. But people think that if you put it aside and you don't look at it, it will not affect. So one study, for example, there are several, asked divided the subject to three groups. One group was told to leave all their belongings outside the room, including their phone. The other group was told to bring their phone, but to put it on the desk. Not the third group was told to bring their phone, but to put it either in their pocket or in their bag, not in front of them. And then they were given cognitive tasks. As you can expect, those who had the phone on the desk performed worse than the others, even if they didn't touch it. So the experimenters said, probably even though they didn't talk, they probably checked, their messages. So the next experiment, they told them to turn it off. So they couldn't see their messages. It was just on the desk. And still, they performed worse than those who didn't have the phone, even though they knew that the phone was turned off, which is very interesting. before I come to the conclusion, I just want to say that there is another study that the experimenter brought people to do some cognitive task, and sometimes she kind of without noticing, she put the phone on the person's desk, and to the other group she put some book on their desk, and then she told them start doing the cognitive task as if she forgot that she put the phone or the book. It was not their phone even, so they don't have to check the messages. Still, those who had the phone of somebody else on their desk still performed worse than those who didn't have phone. So what is my advice? If you work on something that you really have to concentrate, take your phone, put it in another room. If you're really anxious that somebody important will call you, go after an hour and check. But don't put it on the desk when you work. You will see the difference. And as I showed you just now, even if the phone is turned off, even if it's somebody else's phone, it still influences their your performance. So really put it someplace else. And as if you're really hooked and you're really anxious to see if somebody send you an email or something somebody wrote a like in your Facebook, go after an hour and check, but don't put it next to you when you want to concentrate.
Okay? Yes. I feel like I should go. I'm going to put my phone in the other room after we're done so I can stop thinking about it.
Wait, you can do that. Look at the window too.
Yes, I'll get rid of my phone and look out the window. As I think back across my career, I spent a decade in software. I spent a decade now in publishing, and I've encountered people with very crazy, messy offices. I've encountered people with just like ridiculously clean and organized offices. I feel like some of that kind of comes from maybe their bent or their personality or just how they function. But in terms of the spaces that we're working in, how are we impacted by, a messy desk or a messy work environment? How does that impact our ability to do good work?
Yeah. So first of all, you're right. It depends on our personality. Some people are more organized and they're really, or civil, they cannot, everything has to be tidy, and some don't care at all, and some are in the middle. But so this we know, but how it affects us. So first of all, there are studies that show that when something is very disorganized, you not only, it's hard for you to find stuff, which is of course obvious, but you really work less efficiently on tasks that demand conventional thinking. You have to sit and concentrate. If all around you is messy, it affects your performance. However, to make it more complicated, one study showed that when a messy desk sometimes enhances creativity. It doesn't mean that you have to do kind of messy stuff because you want to be creative, but for many creative people, the fact that the desk was messy helped them. But when you have to work on something that doesn't need a new idea, but it can be analytical or not only boring stuff, it's better to have a clean, an organized office. But there is more to that. It was found that people who sit in a messy place are less conventional and if they see temptations, they take them. For example, if you're working at home and everything is messy, there is a better chance that you have less self-control. And then you say, wow, I'm going to watch my TV series and continue to work later, or I'll go to the refrigerator and eat something. There are many studies that showed that, for example, when people sit in a organized room or in a well-lighted room, I would combine the two together and go back to the light that we talked in the beginning, you have better self-control. And for example, when they offered a healthy food or a more tempting but not healthy, like a chocolate cake, those who sat in a lighted room or those who sat in an organized room chose more often the healthy food. They did not resist, they resisted temptation better in an organized or lighted, I'm combining the two studies, than if they sat in a disorganized or dim room. Which shows that it affects us, as I said in the beginning of our interview, not only in the obvious ways that you know, but it affects our self-control. For example, there is a connection between unethical behavior and disorganized office. It doesn't mean that everybody who sits in disorganized office will behave unethically. But if we all are tempted sometimes, to do something not very serious, but something which you shouldn't do, like taking something home, I don't know, 2 pencils or something from the office or do something, and we don't do that because we have self-control and we know that we shouldn't. In some situations, not only in disorganized, but in some situations when we are very tired, for example, we have less self-control. So one of the things is also a dimmer room, less light, and less organized room that will influence our self-control.
I guess sort of a related question I would ask is in terms of people's ability to work well, whether they're standing or sitting. Like I'm in front of my standing desk right now. I probably spend 75% of my workday here, but I also have another desk to my right that I can sit at, and I use that for like focused work, intense work, when I really need to press in. I find I just can't like dig in the same way at the standing desk. Any research or studies related to standing and sitting and how that impacts our ability to focus?
There are many studies that show that standing desks are very healthy physically. And I envy you that you do, because I don't do that, but I get up. But what I do, I get up from time to time. I also sit up for hours on my computer writing, and I get up. But being able to concentrate better, that I think it's individual differences. If you feel that you concentrate better, do that when you have to. People know themselves sometimes. Not often, but they know.
Well, I think for me too, it could be just a sense of, that I think of that as my desk or my environment for deep focus, and this is my like normal day-to-day task space or something. So it's maybe just how I view the space. The last thing I wanted to have you comment on from this third section of the book is creativity. And, one of the things I think that's a challenge for people is, if they have more tasky jobs or entry-level jobs at an organization, they often don't think that they're a creative person, but really creativity is important and involved in all levels of work. I don't care what part of the company you're in. There's always ways to innovate and change and shift and do things differently. So creativity is always important. So in terms of habits, environments, what are some of the things we can do to give our creativity a boost? Because I think one of the challenges, especially when you work at creative companies, or when we're in so many situations that are kind of off the cuff right now, or just on the fly, if you will, where we need to be creative on demand. And so we have to be able to access those things. So anything we can do habit or environment wise to kind of fuel that creative energy.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me this question, because there are many things that are easy to do and really enhance our creativity. And by the way, creativity is very important, as you say, but not definitely in any job. But a survey that was done by researchers found that in the year 2020, creativity is one of the 3 most demanded skills to get a job. It will be even, it was like 5 years ago, it was one of the 10, but it was number 10. Now it's number 3, together with the analytic thinking. So we'll have to have creativity and to be creative in any job, or more and more in the future. And of course, it's not only at work. We have to be creative at home with the kids. Now with the pandemic, a lot of people were stuck at home with the children. They had to be creative, how to entertain them, that they will not sit all the time on TV. And they were creative in cooking, in baking, everywhere. So creativity really goes not only for artists and high-tech people or inventors. It really is important. And for work, it will be more and more a demanded skill. So I think it's very important. So there are several things you can do. First of all, of course, the organization can, this is for those who decide in the organization, they have to give the feeling to the workers that they are not measured by finishing something on time, but they can think more and be rewarded for creativity, not only for completion of a certain task. And not, schedule very, very tight schedule. That doesn't lead to creativity. But from the point of view of the worker themselves, for us, whether you're a freelancer or you work someplace, there are several things that you can do. First of all, if you doodle, when you have to think about it, I have now to think about a new idea. there were studies that show that those who doodled with curvy linears, not straight linears, not straight lines, I'm sorry, but curvy, perform better on creativity tasks. There are several creativity tasks. One of them is two very famous one. One of them is called alternative uses task, which means that think about many uses of one object, for example, these glasses or a brick, and then the answers are analyzed for creativity because there are many. So this is one. The other thing is that you give 3 words to somebody, 3 words that are completely different from each other, and there is one word that connects them, and you have to think creatively to find this word, and they're very, very difficult sometimes. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes, for example, I have here an example. What is the word that combine opera, hand, and dish? This is an easy one. They're easy, they're really difficult, but it's still difficult. Soap, opera, soap hand, and soap dish. So
dish,
yeah. So these are kind of questions that demand that you will think differently. So coming again, when people were doodling, curvy linears compared to straight lines, they perform better. Another thing, get off your desk, what you asked me before, and walk. It can be on treadmill, it can be outside, but not along straight lines, but just walk around. The idea will come to you more often. Another thing, look at a green space or a blue space. It sounds strange, but again, everything, I just wanted to say, maybe I should have said it in the beginning, everything that I say is based on studies, not my studies that also but mainly studies that were published in top journals. So I'm not just saying things out of my head, just to make it clear. So, for example, if you watch something green, it can be the screen of your computer. It can be something, so just look at it for a few minutes, it will enhance your creativity. Blue, even more. Just watch something blue. Another thing is it's called enacting the metaphor. This is really, so I'll tell you the study that they did, and then I'll explain how you can do it without this study. There is a metaphor saying thinking outside the box, thinking outside the box. So one group of researchers built a big box, and they told one group of people to sit inside, each one when it came sat inside the box, another group, each one that came sat outside the box, and for the third group there was no box. And then they gave them one of these tasks that I talked a minute ago that measure creativity. Those who sat outside the box performed better than the other 2 groups. That means that they really enacted the metaphor, sitting outside the box. Now, you can't do in the office, build the box and sit there outside, although you can do it sometimes. But other studies show that if you put a picture of a brain outside a box and you look at it from time to time, it will enhance your creativity. Another thing is a light bulb. There is all these icons that the light, if I gave you a lecture with the presentation, I have many that show that the light bulb pops out, and that's, aha, wow, I have this idea. So there are several studies that show that when people looked at the light bulb, they perform better. For example, one study, they gave them another kind of task that you have to be creative to connect four dots, and you can do that only if you go out of the square of the 4 dots. You have to be creative. If you don't know it, if you're conventional, you can't solve it, but you have to think of differently. That's the creativity. And after the subjects were sitting in 2 rooms, exactly the same. Only in one study, in one group, the experimenter came and said, after a minute, I'm sorry, I think it's a little bit too dim here, not enough light, and turn on a fluorescent lamp. In the other room, he said exactly the same thing, but he turned off a light bulb. And they were watching the light bulb. Those who watched the light bulb performed better. So all these signs of pictures, of metaphors, of looking at the light bulb or sitting or looking at the picture of a light bulb, doodling, walking around, look at it green or looking at blue, will do the work. Try it and see it. And there are more that in the book, all kinds of things. And they're all, as you can see, really easy. It just written, everything is written here.
Throughout our conversation today, we've referenced some different scenarios of people being remote or working from home. Obviously, on this side of the COVID crisis, that's a big thing. Many are working at home for the first time right now. So in terms of applying the principles that people are going to encounter in the book, or what it looks like to apply some of these things when we're virtual or doing things a lot over Zoom and video conferencing right now, any last special tips you'd want to give for those of us who are working at home right now?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, they're working now at home, and from everybody says that even hopefully the pandemic will be over, a lot of people will continue working at home at least part of the week because there are several advantages. You save the commute, you are in a quieter atmosphere, you can schedule your own schedule. If you're a morning person, you can get up very early and work very early. If you're an afternoon, you can sleep late and then work overnight. You can do whatever as long as you do the work. So that's great. But there are some disadvantages. You have to learn to sit and do the work, not to be distracted at home by all kinds of things. You miss people. So there are several things that I want to show you that will help. And there are many, many of them. First of all, establish a designated workplace. Even it doesn't mean that you can sit from time to time on the couch or even lying in your bed with the laptop. That's okay. But mainly have a place that this is your work. Don't go every minute to another place. The second thing, if you can, and that goes to what I spoke before, try to find a room with a window, because the natural light is better than the artificial light. So if you can do that, if you can have a window with a view, even better, as I said before. If you can't, as I said, go and look from time to time or go outside. Again, at home, you can do it better, but not always. Make sure, regardless if you have a window or you don't, that the room is well lit. Because light also, not only to see, because you can sit in a dark room and watch the computer and you can see, but light helps us to be less tired. If you are tired, turn on the light and sit there. Also, establish boundaries between work and leisure time. Make a schedule, write it in the morning. At 12, I'm going to lunch someplace. But decide that before, otherwise you will be tempted all the time. I want to say also that light, as I said before, light, if you're a strong light, a bright light, it helps you resist temptations. So this is another reason to not to sit in the dark room and just watch the computer. The fact that you miss people, which is a thing, some people miss them more than others. So make sure from time to time to schedule lunch or coffee, either with a friend or better with a colleague that you can exchange ideas. If you work part-time like that, part-time it's easier, but if you work most of the time at home, and if you don't have that, go from time to time even to a coffee shop or to park just to see people. Unless you're a person who really don't need anybody, which happens. But most people really miss sometimes, the interactions and the vibe of the office and all that. So my recommendation is the best thing is to do part of the week at home and at least 1 or 2 days in the office. But when you're at home, choose the right space, take breaks. There is no boss to tell you when to take or not. So don't take all the time, but decide in the morning, I'm taking a break 12 o'clock and go to lunch alone or with somebody, schedule and write it as if you're in the office. Then you'll make it light, take a window, and you will resist less temptation. For some people, it's more difficult. Some people say, there were several studies that were done, and after they worked at home, they asked to come back to the office. They said, I cannot concentrate at home because I can't resist temptation. I go all the time to watch TV. Others were even willing to cut their salary, but to work at home. I have the data. If you want, I can give you. Here, I have it. Many people prefer to work from home, even if it means cutting less. According to 2019 All Labs report, 34% of those surveyed were willing to take a pay cut up to 5% and 24% up to 10% of their salary if they could work from home. So a lot of people prefer, and some don't. If you prefer, know how to make the best of it.
Thank you for entertaining that question. I know that's something that's just on a lot of people's minds right now as they're kind of wrestling with what it means to work at home and what it means to be successful. Thalma, in terms of the reader's big journey with the book, when they get to that last page of whatever works, what's the one thing you want them to take away, that core message you hope everybody has heard loud and clear?
Well, that's a difficult question, but I have to answer it. I think what they have to remember and to see, and I think they will see it clearly if they read the book, is that there are many things that in our power and that we neglected them before. We were not aware of their existence, or we were aware of their existence, but we didn't think they influenced it. But we can do very small and very easy things that will enhance our performance, creativity, and well-being, and we'll be happier at work. So I have a chapter on interviews, because a lot of things that can really help people do better, and really easy stuff, all done. So I think that's the main thing that this book wants to show.
And Thalma, where can we go on the web to connect with you and find out more about the book?
So my web, you write Thalma, Thalma, Thalma Lobel. Here I can show you in the camera. Can you see my name here? Here.
Yep. Well, hold it up a little higher. There it is. Yeah,
Thalma Lobel. And don't write in the meantime thalmalobel.com, but Thalma Lobel home, and it will bring you to my website. You can also write me an email. I'll be very happy to answer. It's Thalma, Talma, without the H, at tauex, tauex.tau.ac.il. TAU is Tel Aviv University, so it is. So Thalma, it's tauex.tau.ac.il. And if you find my website, all the information is there, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions.
Well, like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Thalma and pick up your own copy of the book as well. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Thalma Lobel. Once again, our book today was Whatever Works, the small cues that make a surprising difference in our success at work and how to create a happier office. Thalma, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's truly been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's the same thing. It was a pleasure and an honor, and thank you very much for inviting me.